Hey everybody, welcome to Pod of the South. I'm Gerard Matthews.
John Whiteside.
And we've got a couple things right off the top. If you want to become a monthly contributor to the podcast, that would very much help us out. You can do that at a link in our Instagram bio. If you're not following us on Instagram, that's the best place to get any of our stuff. If you don't want to listen to these full episodes, we post clips on there. You can email us at podofthesouth@gmail.com. If you haven't already, I know you hear this a million times if you listen to podcasts. Please give us 5 stars, kind reviews.
Yeah, smash that like button.
Smash that like button. Get in the comments. Tell us what you think. That stuff all really helps people find the podcast. If we're going to keep doing it, we would like to reach some new people. So tell your friends and neighbors. Doing this every week is kind of insane because I thought when we kind of set this schedule that we might strain for things to talk about or something.
We literally have too much. I finally did a, kind of a storyboard last night. It was just like that we could talk for 2 hours.
We could do the whole thing on the Supreme Court, although, I don't really feel super qualified to talk about much of that. A lot of activity over the Supreme Court this week already. We're taping on Wednesday.
Well, right.
A couple of exciting things, but it's mostly bad.
Yeah.
What are your big?
Well, I think, we always say we're not experts, and of course, neither one of us are lawyers. But anytime you have a Supreme Court ruling, you're gonna become a pretend lawyer really quick. And I think the most interesting thing, because I'm not trying to get into the specifics of the case, but essentially, they ruled that the president can fire anybody at those agencies for any time, right? And so those agencies were set up by statute to have some independence, not, obviously not ultimate independence because they're appointed by presidents. But what was interesting is that the Supreme Court and this Supreme Court are just absolutists. Whenever they get to a ruling, they kind of want to rule in favor of this administration. And so probably if you're doing legal theory, they're right. Like ultimately that's an executive branch, whether it's the FTC, the EPA, and it goes to the president. So there's a thing called reliance interest. I won't go too far into it, but judges consider, like when they're overturning a precedent, what impact that would have on society, right? And so that's part of it. So with these agencies that protect the environment, or the FTC, which is consumer protection, they're like, well, look, it's an executive branch. Ultimately, the president can fire them. When it came to the Federal Reserve, they have this carve out. And what's interesting to me is that we pretend the Supreme Court is beyond influence, but essentially they said, hey, reliance interest was how it impacts society. They're like, environment, fuck it. Consumer protection, fuck it. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're going to mess with the stock market and interest rates? And, and of course, this court goes back and goes, well, the Federal Reserve has been around forever before our Constitution. They cite Alexander Hamilton and all this shit. But ultimately, it's like, okay, the Supreme Court is an absolutist when they want to do in favor of Trump, unless it kind of affects them.
Well, here's my gut reading on that. Is it that they don't trust Trump with that one?
Correct. But they're like, fuck it on the EPA. That's just the environment.
But that's telling.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
That they'll let him do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, except when it comes to the big boy stuff.
Right. Don't mess with the stock market. That's I swear to God, that's essentially it.
Well, this is kind of this came out of this flurry of decisions. Did you see the thing about Nina Totenberg and NPR?
No.
So when one of the decisions came out yesterday, this is my kind of secondhand hearing of it.
Sure.
Okay, these news organizations have these stories ready to go. Like when they have an election. And
Nina Totenberg's been covering the Supreme Court for 40 years.
She's fantastic.
Yeah.
She published a story yesterday that said Judge Samuel Alito was going to retire, and
Jesus,
it stayed up for 5 minutes. I guess they hit the wrong button on the wrong story. Now, they were talking about it on Pod Save America, and there's kind of like 2 kind of possibilities for what happened. One is they've just got this in the can because he's old and they think he's going to retire.
Sure.
The second one is she knows what she's doing. She's been around the Supreme Court for a long time. She has some embargoed information. She went ahead and pre-wrote the story. And apparently some internet detectives kind of looked at the metadata attached to that post, and it was there was something in that metadata that led them to believe that this was like something she had kind of like ready to go and embargoed, and was because it was set to be released on Friday.
Yeah, and she was like really good friends, I think, with Bader Ginsburg, and like if anybody would have inside sources,
Right.
it would be her. She's
She did
literally
the
been
talk
covering the
when
court for 40 years. Right.
RBG came here. But so that opens up a whole other can of worms. We could have a Supreme Court justice retire on Friday.
God, I don't want to regret saying this, but like, I don't know if there's no one could be worse than Alito. I mean, if you're ranking the shittiest Supreme Courts, maybe justice of all time, like Clarence Thomas has got to be one. Alito's right there. I mean, I'm sorry, but in that, we had a good decision in the sense that they upheld the Constitution and allowed birthright citizenship to stand. But the three dissenting was Clarence Thomas, Alito, and now Gorsuch. And it's just, so, I'm sure Trump could nominate somebody who's worse, but like, I think that's really good news because, Amy Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, Roberts was obviously a George W. Bush appointee. Like, I can handle them. They're conservative, but like they draw a line and they don't go out of their way to reinvent the Constitution just because Trump wants it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that. That's a very optimistic take on that because there's nothing the Democrats could do to stop it at this point, right? They couldn't pull a. I mean, could they just not show up?
Well, what would be interesting is this would suck all the oxygen out of the room because I think the world would kind of stop for this Supreme Court justice. Trump will have somebody in there that's, loyal to him, but he's on his way out, and, I'd hate to defend Trump, but like he's not made the worst appointments. Like he's going to shove, like you saw him kind of try and pack the court with Amy Coney Barrett, rushing that in right before the end. But I mean, there's just not many Scalitos left, and so we could get an upgrade there.
Well, here's one thing I'm kind of wondering, like, as these decisions are coming down, it seems like whenever I'm, like, trying to think through a political issue, I always try to think of, like, what would I think if this was reversed?
Yeah.
What would I think if the Obama administration did this or the Biden administration did this, if this Supreme Court is making decisions like this, that is granting him all this executive power, it's either a failure to think about what if the tide turns one day, or they think they want to tide the turn so the tide never turns back.
Yeah, I mean,
I kind of believe that there can be that nefarious of a motivation at hand.
I think some of the reactions like that, like, well, the Democrat will just get in and make all the appointments. Two things is like, one, a lot of times when Supreme Court decisions come down, there's that knee-jerk reaction from the left or the Democrats, and oftentimes I'm like, I won't say it out loud, but you can kind of see their reasoning and go, okay, it's not my favorite, but if you were following the Constitution, even though this may hurt some feelings, this makes sense, or, you can at least argue it legally. With this, the ability to just massively fire all these, before now independent agencies. I think the sad thing is you kind of end career, people don't like bureaucracy, but there's been these career agencies. So it's like career public service because you go in and you survive several presidencies, and in theory you get expert on whatever you're regulating or the agencies or the policies. And of course, if you went rogue, the president's really always had that power to fire you. It was just in the statute that it couldn't be for no cause. And of course, Trump's like, no, I want to do it for no cause because I don't like the person. And that's what brought on this court case. But I just think it's kind of sad that it will be kind of the end of career service. And I don't think a Democratic president's going to get in and clear house, but they could, but I don't think the end game is to kind of take the elections back. I just think they just, when they see a cause like that, whether it's affirmative action or anything where they're like the civil rights laws, on political theory or legal theory, I should say, you can make an argument for it. But again, there's these things called reliance interests and how when you overturn precedent, what that changes in society. And they very much always factored that in. They just kind of ignore that shit now whenever they want to overturn something. So, yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately president can fire all these agency heads at will, and that's the end of it. I think all in all, it had been a terrible Supreme Court, session or whatever you want to call it. Like they've really standing up for birthright citizenship is a huge thing. They really knocked back basically his ambition, So I think on the whole, it's probably a draw in terms of, how it would go. I think it's such a shame that they didn't go, look, we could obviously go back to be an absolutist in the Constitution, but I have a problem when you're like Alexander Hamilton and all these guys are so great, which they were, but acting like they were almost gods and that anything they said is just absolute. It's like they owned slaves. Women couldn't vote. People who didn't own property couldn't vote.
They'd never seen a dishwasher.
Right. Or that's what I was sitting there thinking on the drive over. It's like, of course they didn't understand that there'd be a need for the EPA because we had a country that was pristine and we're all going to go explore it. So of course later on we'll have environmental protections. They could have never foreseen, like you said, the internet or Facebook or monopolies. And so we put that into statute, and you would like to have an FTC that's independent because they're for consumer protection.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing that the court's like, consumer protection, that won't affect us. Environment, we're doing well. But stock market, that impacts me as a Supreme Court justice. So, there's a carve-out for the Federal Reserve. And the reason is because Alexander Hamilton did it, and it's been before that's the ticket.
Yeah.
It's total bullshit, but whatever.
Well, what do you think about this? So let's say the Democrats run the table in the midterms. We get a Democratic president next time, and they can do whatever they want. Do they expand the Supreme Court?
It's beyond my pay grade. I don't know. My biggest thing with, the kind of Bernie people or the people who want to be radical, and I guess you can hold me to this. If we do pack the court, don't say it before you get elected. Let's get the Congress. But, I don't think we necessarily need to pack the court. I think, we've always waited for the tide to finally turn. I think the tide has turned on Trump. I mean, he is so ineffective. He's losing the Republicans. I think if he nominated a Supreme Court, it would be so interesting because Bill Cassidy, John Cornyn, I think those guys have gone permanently rogue in terms of, just accepting him when he's shoveling shit into us.
Yeah.
But no, I think what's exciting is that a new president can come in and, Biden may have been too careful. If you can go in and go, here's my FTC, here's my EPA, here's all these people who are going to be swing the pendulum hopefully the other way, not too far, but let's have consumer protection. Let's go after monopolies. Let's stop this massive unregulated Wild West that we're doing, that's bringing us data centers and one energy company and one television company. Let's bite back and not have to go fast and break things.
Well, I don't have a fully formed opinion on this, but the only thing that I do know for sure that if this situation were reversed and the Republicans had been at a disadvantage for 20 years and they finally got power, they would totally expand the court and pack it. That's the thing, is that they're not fucking around.
Yeah.
And we're kind of well, let's see, the tide is turning, maybe it'll get better, it'll even out. They grab power when they can and figure out the rest later. And there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I'm not. It's not my first thing. I wouldn't be against it in that, but FDR had a huge mandate. Let's say, we were in the Great Depression, passed all these incredible policies that create a little bit of a safety net, put people back to work. But even his attempt to pack the court was a bridge too far. My most sacred thing is not for Democrats to overreach. But I do think packing the court would be an overreach where you would have this huge backlash. But, depending on how charismatic the president we got elected, if he's just I've got an agenda and I can't get it done unless, I don't know. It's not my first priority, but I think, I'm not going to be sad with as much abuse as Trump's put upon us, the ability to take away independent agencies. I mean, I know that we can't get too in, but what he's done to the justice system is so criminally wrong, and I know it's not the most compelling story, but when government lawyers are going to judges and now judges have to review the evidence because so many times they brought false information, the government is going after people and they have such a partisan agenda or actually just a Trump's personal agenda, they're manufacturing evidence. They talk about deep state and all that shit. The Justice Department of the United States can no longer be trusted by judges, and it should be 5-alarm bell sounding off everywhere because nothing could be more sacred. And they've always prided themselves, when the Justice Department brings a case against you, back in the day, you were usually screwed because that's how careful they were and that's how many resources they have. Now they're using those resources to manufacture evidence and get you've seen so many press conferences, whether it's Kash Patel, where whatever they're bringing is bullshit now, but they get that press hit. the right wing, blogosphere goes, "Oh, see, crooked Democrats," and then of course, 3 weeks later, you find out charges dismissed. It's bad what he's done to the Justice Department. So, am I going to be sad if we overreach the other way? No, I hope we don't. But I think this is going to be a permanent shift when we go back.
Well, we've got to change our attitude because they would. I remember when I was in college and I worked for Dave Parker, he had this quote on his wall, and I can't remember the exact wording or where it was from, but it said the terms of battle are set by the side with the least morals.
It's true.
And so when they get in power, they fucking go for it and they hoard it and they get more of it and they solidify it. And it's just, we're not like that. And like, I just think we're seeing like the results of that after about 20 years.
To your original question, though, I think, yes, that's exactly what the Republicans would do if they had, if there's a 6-3 liberal advantage and we were shoving regulations down their throat, the environment was ultimately protected and like business can't even operate. But I think the biggest underscore here is when we get time to presidential elections, could we stop going, well, I think I'd like to have a beer with that guy, which is why George W. Bush was elected, or Trump's kind of funny and I kind of like him better on a personality level than Harris. It's like, stop. There's Supreme Court justices that are nominated. There's all kinds of policies. There's agencies head. There's literally thousands and thousands of things that impact your life that are literally dictated by who's in the White House. And so it's like, oh, even if you don't like the person better, go, what policies are going to benefit? And oh, yeah, even if I need to hold my nose, go, I can't handle these kind of a Supreme Court. And had we not had George W. Bush or Trump, we'd be looking at a vastly different Supreme Court.
Yeah. Well, maybe we need to have a segment called J.D. Vance Was Right, because last week you talked about how he may have some ground to stand on in his Iran thing. Uh-huh. But I don't know if you saw this a few days ago where he was talking at some conference and said that if Watergate happened today, it'd be a 12-hour news story and everybody would forget it. How casually and off the cuff he said that was just really telling to me. Yeah. And I don't really know what he was trying to achieve by saying that, but what he seemed to be saying is the corruption that we're brazenly committing every day, makes Watergate look like peanuts. And also, you know what I'm saying? It's just kind of insane to make that kind of acknowledgement.
Yeah, there was kind of two things. One is like how schmarmy J.D. Vance is that he's going back to the Nixon library and kind of, I don't know, rewriting Nixon's legacy when it was clearly a criminal presidency the whole time, literally using the FBI against people. What he is right about is that it wouldn't be that long of a story because, and this strategy has just worked. Trump will just do it and brag about it rather than trying to cover it up. As everybody always says, it's the cover up. And as you know, we used to worry about conflicts of interest, and we had, I know everybody in Arkansas can remember, we had, a 10-year, but at least a 4-year investigation of Whitewater over $100,000 land deal that the Clintons lost money on. McDougal was kind of a scam artist, just like a lot of real estate guys. But clearly, at best, just maybe, a mistaken investment by the Clintons that lost money over $100,000. Donald Trump just posted openly, because he had to report it, that he made $1.4 billion last year as president, majority on cryptocurrency. Is it $2 billion? On cryptocurrency that is not in any way, shape, or form anything other than a Ponzi scheme where he creates it, inflates the price, and then they dump it. He's gotten, of course, who was buying that crypto was Saudi Arabia and all these, interests that are getting favorable treatment from him. It is just open corruption. But what they're smart about is they're not trying to cover it up. They're just like, yep.
Well, and there's such a deluge of it.
Yeah.
There's and J.D. Vance, he was right.
Yeah.
There are so many scandals that would have ended a presidency. Talk about the Supreme Court upholding or not hearing his appeal on the E. Jean Carroll case, the woman who he raped and owes $5 million to.
Yeah,
the president raped a woman,
Yeah.
Was found guilty of it and owes her $5 million. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, that's right. And
well, how about that he appealed it to the Supreme Court? That's a perfect example of like, one, he was found guilty and had to pay that civil penalty. But under his guise of like, here's the arguments I make to my base. One, I'll make all the money I can because I'm a badass. And so they're like, who cares? He makes a bunch of money. He's a badass. Even though it's corrupt as shit, even though it's completely unethical, and any other president done this, to be like, holy shit, look at this conflict of interest. The same thing with like his alpha male, and it's horrible, but he's just like, oh, all these women want to sleep with me, and when they do, they lie about it later. So like, sadly, him appealing that civil court case to the Supreme Court reinforces their theme of like, he was not guilty of that. That's why he appealed it to the Supreme Court.
But that one thing alone would have ended anybody else in our lifetime.
Yeah, Bill Clinton got a blowjob, a consensual one, and it, derailed the 2000 presidential election.
Yeah.
And was, the source of a,
But and that's
independent
not,
investigator.
And that's not to say anything about the financial corruption, but like to your point, the thing I'm no Clinton apologist, but the thing that
I think I am, but that's fine.
I think you are.
Yeah.
But somebody told me came up in a class I had at GW one time that Bill and Hillary Clinton are the two most investigated people in all of history, basically. Right. Like there was a cottage industry of like trying to find something on Clinton while he was president, and the only thing they ever found in all of that,
correct,
was that he lied about getting a blowjob.
And they they threatened to use a DNA thing on a dress that she kept. Look, I mean, I will always defend the Clintons because I don't think anybody knows what it would be like if somebody spent $50 million to investigate your life. The other thing is Hillary Clinton was right. There was a right-wing machine, and it went into place. And let's be clear. The reason they did it is because Newt Gingrich went, holy shit, that son of a bitch is so likable and so willing to work with the other side and so much wants to work down the middle that it'll be the end of the Republican Party.
Yeah. So
they came up with a strategy of like, let's not give in on anything, no health care, and then let's spend all of our time as a party investigating him. And, I remember David Pryor saying to me when I got to drive him around working for Mark Pryor, he goes, LBJ sat us down the first time when I got elected. He's like, Republicans exist for two reasons, to cut taxes and to investigate the Democrats. And it's true. It's like, nobody ever holds them to account. This Republican Congress and Senate hasn't passed shit since that big, beautiful bill, which is one of the worst pieces of legislation on earth.
Yeah.
They finally passed one other piece of legislation to help with affordable housing. I'll give credit to French Hill for moving a lot of that. And, of course, Trump is, threatening to veto it. But, like, how they get away with this? Republicans literally go up there and do nothing except investigate Democrats, and nobody ever calls them on it because they've built this, through line of like what they are as a party is like, we're there to cut taxes, and then if we don't do anything else, we're saving you money in theory. Of course they're not. Of course that's all bullshit, but it's just like these Republicans spent all that money investigating Bill Clinton. I would argue Bill and Hillary Clinton could have they would be billionaires had they not been in politics. They're two of the smartest humans on earth. They would have been successful at anything they did. They went into public service and sacrificed. You don't have to agree with everything they did, and they certainly made plenty of mistakes. But like the idea that they're the head of this global empire, or they did it to enrich themselves, it's like, you're insane.
Yeah.
They would have run any of these tech companies had they not gone into politics,
Well, I think maybe one day we should do just a whole podcast on how all of this, where we're at right now, is Newt Gingrich's fault.
Yeah.
The man who invented wedge issues. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him.
100%. And one of the biggest pieces of shit on earth. And of course, they adopted that same strategy. We've had some moments of where we thought we were going to turn the corner. And after George W. Bush basically wrecked the economy and the tide turned so much that we elected, Obama, there was the same kind of moment where Republicans are like, shit, all right, gig is up. We have to start being legislators. This guy is so lovable, such a dynamic superstar. We need to work with them. And they went right back to they kind of dusted off the Newt Gingrich playbook. They're like, what if we opposed him on fucking everything?
Right.
And they did. And nobody ever holds them to account. It's like, and so that's what drives me it drives me a lot crazy about the Bernies. Because they're like, oh, Democrats are too careful. Like, motherfucker, name me one issue where we didn't go far enough. It was because we were stopped by the Republicans. And it's very rare. Like, you could literally, and I go deep, Lieberman compromising on the public option. Fair enough, right? Because, had he gone that way, would have had a public option that would have changed the dynamic in healthcare completely because, health insurance companies couldn't compete with a public option.
Well,
But outside of that,
I mean, but
it's
I
we were
would-
stopped by Republicans because they're assholes.
I don't want to get into a whole thing on this, but I mean, there was a time, like around the Tea Party, where Democrats thought you had to be a Republican to get elected,
Sure.
and that hurt. I mean, you remember Blanche Lincoln? I mean, I remember she was so middle of the road. She just was trying to make everybody happy and pissed everybody off.
Of course. And that's what,
you know.
look, I had this argument with a candidate I'm currently saying, stop putting low in your expectations because you think what's plausible.
Yeah.
Like when you're on the campaign trail, be aspirational and go, if we could have universal health care, let's do it. Don't go, but we have to find a way to pay for it. Yes, Democrats have been milquetoast. They've been pussies. And yeah, look, Blanche Lincoln and all them, they were looking at what was on the wall. We had, after George W. Bush totally wrecked the fucking economy and President Obama came in, instead of working with them, of course, what did they do? They go, oh, big scary black guy is doing healthcare changes. They're going to, be terrible. Of course, they were going to be great. But the unknown and the fact that you had a president that didn't look like anybody in Arkansas for the most part, the polling numbers were off the charts because I remember being there. And I was pleading with the people to go, fine. But, remember when Bill Clinton had the same type of healthcare plan when you'd go to Pocahontas, people knew Bill Clinton, they'd defend him. Like, you may not like this policy, but I can promise you the president's trying to do right by you.
Yeah.
And that was a difference. When they went to Pocahontas and Obama was president, they didn't defend shit. And I watched that, and you're right. Like, when we have a good policy, we've done it in the Iraq War, just stand up for what's right. Even if you lose, we'll come out on the other end once we were right.
Yes.
And that's what we don't do. But any of these Bernie people pretend that Democrats compromised just for the sake of compromise. They didn't. They did it because you had such a strong Republican opposition, and you can say people are being moderate or establishment, but all they're trying to do is figure out what we could pass in the Senate with this opposition party. It's not like they went, hey, we don't want health care for everybody, so we're going to milquetoast our legislation. And Obama was a perfect example. You have to pass legislation for it to work. So having this aspirational shit that you think is going to work and it'll never get passed, you get nothing. So it's like they're just not practical. There's just, very rare occurrences. Can you show me a Democrat that compromised because they just wanted to compromise? They compromised because this is what they thought in their heart of hearts could get through a Republican-controlled or, a filibuster at the time. So
Yeah.
it sucks. It sucks when Democrats compromise when we have the votes. I give you that completely.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think
for the most part, the compromise has been because we have a very fierce opposition party.
Well, the time for timidity is over, I think. But one final thing on the Trump corruption stuff. Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman, who have written this book, Regime Change, which I'd like to read at some point. Jonathan Swan said in an interview, and look, they've been researching this book for forever and have got into some really inside baseball in terms of like the inner workings of the White House and stuff. He said we probably only have a grasp on about 1% of the corruption that's going on.
Yeah, Maggie Haberman's kind of like the Nina Totenberg. She's like the Trump whisperer in terms of getting access.
We're kind of running close to time. I did want to mention that state fair in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And only because a couple, I mean, it's totally Trump. It's just everything he touches turns to shit.
Right.
He took money that had been set aside to do this. He pumped it all over to an organization called Freedom 250 that he, is involved with. So they took all the money for that. They turned it into this total shit show. And of course, there's going to be some big donor event where people that give to that foundation can have
get
dinner
access
with Trump or
right.
whatever. But the clips that I've seen online, especially from because Fox News has been broadcasting live from there all week.
Right.
And it is just the lamest thing
they can't fix
I've
the optics
ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's a field full of no one.
Right.
But the thing that again is so Trumpy about this is that any of the speakers from the stage or any time they go to those Fox News anchors, either in the studio or out there in the field, they always say there's thousands of people here. And you can plainly see that there is not.
Right.
And it just goes back to that first press conference with Sean Spicer where he said this is the highest attendance at an inauguration ever, period.
Right. It's
and
alternative
it's
facts.
something, it's like, we can see that it's not, you assholes,
Yeah.
And it's just the delusion that you have to say that to people. I mean, if you're on Fox News, I mean, I've always said they don't have any respect for their audience. They don't have any respect for who they're talking to, because you can clearly see that what they're saying is incorrect. You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the administration has been big on, like, don't believe your lying eyes. Like, they will take empirical evidence and say that's not true. It's alternative facts. I think the more interesting thing is that Trump should just never try to do music or art or any of that stuff, because he's just not good at it. And it's just kind of funny. It's like the two things you know are going to happen. There's going to be a big pot of money, and it's just like, oh, brother, art thou. It's all about the money, boys. We'll find out, the forensic audit of this Trump administration will be the most comprehensive effort in the history of the world. We'll find out that a bunch of people got away with murder in terms of siphoning off a bunch of money from this event. And of course it was a shit show, because nobody in the music industry or the art industry or anything that would be compelling for that type of festival wants to have anything to do with them. So it's like, dude, when Martina McBride and all those people come, cancel. But it's just such a joke that he thinks he can pull off. He just, for whatever reason, I hate Trump for many reasons, but one of the worst is how horrible his taste is. Yeah. Whether it's in color schemes or music or art, he's just a fucking Philistine.
Yeah, he's the tackiest person alive.
With the caveat, can we talk local stuff? Because I kind of want to celebrate. I hope to have certain segments, and of course, we always want to talk about art and music. One of the things I'm most excited about, and kind of contrast to the America's 250 state fair that was a disaster, was the Arkansas Folklife Festival. I've always had in my fantasy of fantasy, this has personally to do with me, is that I love music so much. I always think about how to put Arkansas's best foot forward. If we're going to have a Mount Rushmore, it'd be Levon Helm and Johnny Cash, and I always think about stuff like that. But a couple years ago, maybe 5 to 10, the Cal's Library was going to do a music festival. And we had one iteration where Lucero was in, did it. Anyway, I got considered for that executive director role and didn't get it. And so it's always kind of pining of like, why the hell can't we have a music festival that just calls back all the Arkansas musicians we have and have it something that's sustainable and you'll have a great crowd. Well, shout out to Rachel Reynolds, because she is, a great kind of local in the music kind of industry and, big supporter of the Garhole records and a lot of these musicians. She pulled off what I think is a remarkable event last weekend, and we had Lucinda Williams headline. We had a lot of the local musicians like Nick Shoulders,
Bobby Rush.
Well, Bobby Rush is obviously kind of a blues legend, but where she really, Willie Carlisle, Dylan Earl, Nick Shoulders, all these, we have really great musicians who really claim Arkansas. They don't get celebrated enough. And she pulled a lot of people from Mountain View and kind of that folk system. She basically has set down a first festival that we can do for the next 30 years.
Yeah. No, she did a fantastic job.
And I'm so proud, and exactly what I thought. The crowd that was there was like, an outdoor whitewater tavern.
Yeah.
It was great, and I think she should be applauded. I saw Max Brantley or some blowhard criticizing her for taking money from Sarah, and I think that's a good lesson for us of like, all right, time out. I don't like Sarah Sanders, but if you're putting on a Folklife Festival celebrating Arkansas and the governor wants to give you some money, you take it.
Yeah.
What That just kind of insanity. Like we haven't had a good Arkansas-based music festival forever since the beginning of time. We have one pulled off, and that you're going to go on Facebook and go, oh well, you took money from Sarah, that compromises you. Like, you're an artist. You know how hard it is to raise money to put on a music festival and have it for free?
And she had a small team, but she did that, almost single-handedly. I mean, her and a small group of people did that. And, I mean, that was a ton of work, because what you didn't see, she had events all over the state for a year maybe leading up to it, where, like, they met with communities and asked them, what are the valuable things you have in your community in terms of dance, music, food, art, culture, and what would you like to see represented on the stage? And I mean, like, a lot of the programming of the festival was a result of a lot of that work that nobody's ever going to see.
Yeah. And she had Cindy Wolf and Mark Blue, who's from Big Smith. Her taste was spot on. And it was such a celebration of so many good local musicians that we don't do enough. I just think it's insane for us not to go, that was great. How do we make it even better next year?
Yeah, excellent.
Part of the South will sponsor you.
Speaking of local music, I've been talking with Bonnie Montgomery about doing
Nice.
an interview here soon. So we'll try to get with Bonnie.
Kick me out of the chair and get somebody interesting in here. I understand.
Stay tuned for that interview with Bonnie.
Did you see the Mexico game last night?
No, I have not
pretty
been
exciting.
watching the World Cup.
Well, Mexico won 2-0, and I can't think of kind of going to Hill Station. It's a pretty good time here in Little Rock. They're doing a pretty remarkable job, but Mexico looked really good last night.
Where does this stand? Where are we at in the World Cup?
So we play tonight. We're in the knockout. So think of the first round as kind of a round robin where 4 teams play in one division. Those top 2 advance, and then certain of the high-performing 3s advance. And then essentially it's like the second round of the NCAA basketball tournament. So we're in the round of 32. Whoever wins the game right now is going to the Sweet 16. America plays today. And
so we still have a ways to go before.
Well, we finished first in our little group of 4. So now we're in what they call the knockout round, which is the round of 32. And you win that first win, which is what Mexico did last night. You're into the Sweet 16. Just think of it like that for all the Arkansas people. So we have the chance to go to the Sweet 16. Mexico did it last night. Germany lost. There have been some really good upsets. So anyway, America should do well. It's pretty exciting. It's a hell of a good time. It was pretty hot last night, but it's a hell of a good time to go to Hill Station and watch some soccer.
Okay. I did want to mention a book. I mentioned that I was getting into the French Revolution last time. I found this book called The Revolutionary Temper by Robert Darnton, and he's got a lot of books about the revolution, and he's also I think like a communication scholar. But like what this book is, Paris 1748 to 1789, it's about communication, and it's like how word traveled about the things that were happening leading up to the French Revolution. So if you don't know anything about it, like I didn't, nearly don't, it's a good place to get started because he does cover sort of the big events that led up to it, but so you get some of that history, but it's mostly about like how did people learn about it and how did people talk about it. And
that's interesting.
Music was a big thing. They had these kind of tunes that like they would set lyrics of current events to, and they would sing these in public squares, and they would get kind of passed around.
Revolution's always been led by musicians.
Yeah, and I mean they would sing about how like Louis XVI's dick didn't work, and so I mean it's like pretty,
gives me an idea for a band about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So do you think that there's a blueprint for kind of what's happened? I mean, I know what happened in Paris essentially or France was that the have-nots got so have-notish.
Yeah, the only blueprint is like wealth inequality. I mean, it can only get so bad for so long before people just like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And I pick up on some of that when I scroll through social media or just talk to people, whether it's like young people who can't afford a house and know they're never going to.
Yeah. I think this is the death knell for Trump in the midterms is that, granted, like we said, his strategy is basically just to brag about it no matter how corrupt. But when you're struggling and like it's not a conspiracy, it's like Trump himself reported that he at least 1.4 billion this year. It's like that, it's like him saying, I don't care about housing affordability. And, I just made 1.4 billion off cryptocurrency. It's like, you can't let them eat cake. It's like, you can't have a person more out of touch with the concerns of everyday people.
And how do we have childhood hunger if we've got one person that has $1 trillion?
Right.
That's just that ain't going to last for long.
Right. And those kind of like populist arguments, it's like, we don't have the money. It's like, if we didn't do Iran, we would end childhood hunger. We'd have universal pre-K if we just didn't do Iran.
I think some of that is starting to sink in with people.
Yeah.
Like the sort of like budget,
It would just be one thing if the conservatives were like balancing the budget over here and we're tightening our belt, and it's like, shit, it's like, it really is hard living under a Republican administration, but they are restoring our bank balance, or all these, kind of fantasies that, my uncle and other conservatives, do in their real life. It's like, no, we're hemorrhaging money all over the place. We're spending billions on ICE, billions on a war of choice in Iran. We're giving trillions back to tax cuts for people who fucking don't need it. So I think that ship has sailed, that we can't afford it if we want to give people health care or end childhood hunger or give, pre-K to our children.
Yeah. Anything else worth mentioning?
No, I mean, Wimbledon's on, but I know I'm the only one who cares about that, so... And the reason we're a day late because holy shit, this weather's awful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna blame that on Trump too. It just the summer like that when it gets too hot. I walked the dogs this morning early, so it put me in a little bit better mood. But at 9:19, it was intolerable a.m. And that I don't see people who like summer. It's fucking dog shit.
Well, and like in Europe, it's awful.
Yeah,
I mean,
my sister's in Paris right now, and she got an Airbnb, and they only had a portable AC unit, so she ended up switching out and going to a hotel.
Yeah,
and it ruined. Like I was talking with her, I was like, "Well, is it kind of a cool spot, but they just don't have AC, and that's changed your mind on it?" And it's just amazing how the lack of AC ruined her whole outlook on her entire location there.
Yeah, it's bad.
I hear it's like a historic heat wave,
and they've got like people that live in apartment buildings. Like, so imagine if you live on the 5th floor of an apartment.
Yeah.
And all that heat's just rising. They've got people, they're opening up public parks for 24 hours a day. People are just going and sleeping in parks.
Well, and I heard they're going into the river and just drowning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, that, look, I don't want to say America's above, but like, it's probably time to get AC.
Hey, that's the one thing we've done.
Yeah.
Just
America
nailed was the AC.
I spend majority of my time with HVAC people. So yeah, no question, America got air conditioning correct.
I did want to end on this, if it's okay with you. I did see James McMurtry at Whitewater Tavern last night. He's playing there again tonight. He is so excellent.
Yeah.
And I kind of hate when I read about him and they one of the first things they say about him is he's Larry McMurtry's son, but who wrote Lonesome Dove.
Yeah, Larry. Yeah,
it's like it's kind of like unfair because he's so outstanding in his own right. I do think that kind of does give you an idea of some of the soup he swam in when he was growing up.
Talk about hatred or being a hater. I've hated on James McMurtry before because his like bitterness and his like Walmart take. I'm like, dude, you're the son of the most successful screenwriter in American history. Like, slow your roll, rich kid. But I've seen, especially his last concert at Whitewater, he was phenomenal. He has some phenomenal songs, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being the son of one of the most famous novelists. I mean, if my dad wrote Lonesome Dove, I would get over it pretty quick if I'm known it as his son.
Yeah, I guess so. But
but he's wonderful.
Such an incredible, very literary, writing, great songwriting.
Kind of a curmudgeon.
He very much is a curmudgeon. He's been touring the past couple of years with this woman named Betty Sue, Asian American woman. I think she's from New York. But anyway, last night, I think it was at the end of her, she's been opening for him. At the end of her set, they sang this song together. It was a Woody Guthrie song. And the song is called The Plane Wreck at Los Gatos.
Cool.
And it was a plane wreck that happened, I don't know where, but it was a plane full of mostly migrant farm workers that were being deported, and they were taking them on a plane back to Mexico, and the plane exploded. There was a plane wreck and everybody died.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a song about that, and the words about Woody Guthrie. The crops are all in, and the peaches are rotting, the orange piled in their creosote crates. They're flying them back to the Mexico border to pay all their money to wade back again. Goodbye to my Juan, goodbye Rosalita. Adios mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. You won't have your names when you ride the big airplane. All they will call you will be deportees. My father's own father, he waded that river. They took all the money he made in his life. My brothers and sisters came working the fruit trees, and they rode in the trucks till they laid down and died. Some of us are illegal, and some are not wanted. Our work contract's out, and we have to move on. 600 miles to that Mexican border, they chase us like outlaws, like rustlers, like thieves. We died in your hills, we died in your deserts. We died in your valleys and died on your plains. We died neath your trees and we died in your bushes. Both sides of the river, we died just the same. The sky plane caught fire over Los Gatos Canyon, a fireball of lightning, and shook all our hills. Who are all these friends all scattered like dry leaves? The radio says they are just deportees. Is this the best way we can grow our big orchards? Is this the best way we can grow our good fruit? To fall like dry leaves, to rot on the topsoil, and be called by no name except deportees.
That's beautiful. No notes. What a great way to end it.
To be in a quiet room where everybody's listening to that, is like, it's good for the soul.
It's absolutely beautiful and a perfect way to end this episode. And they sang a Woody Guthrie at the Folklife Festival. Lucinda did on Saturday, and is there anybody more powerful than Woody Guthrie? And like we talked about, the power of music to take a message to somebody who may not hear it any other way. You know, this land is your land.
Yeah, absolutely
Pretty powerful.
incredible. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Appreciate it.